Hey everyone, how's it going? Azren, the language nerd here. Hope you're doing very, very well. I want to make a video here from my car as per usual, as you guys can see. Make a quick little video talking about something that I've talked about before, but I want to revisit, and I want to revisit it in a different lens. And it's the conversation around the difficulty of learning languages. Because as we've said on this channel before, as we've talked about before, as many people have talked about, we have many individuals who believe that learning languages is not difficult. And we also have people on the other side of the coin, on the other side of the equation, who believe that yes, learning languages is difficult. And there's lots of debates that happen between these two conflicting viewpoints. My whole perspective on as of today is a bit conflicted. It's a little bit undecided. And to be really open with you, I have in many ways kind of flip-flopped between the two answers and really believed things in between the two extremes as well at different points in time. Here's kind of where my mindset is as of today. On one hand, I believe that learning languages is not necessarily difficult, but I do think it is something that is, for the majority of people, time-consuming. I believe that with learning languages, there's a lot of stuff you have to put into your brain. You have to memorize new words, you have to learn a different sound system, you have to learn new grammar, you have to understand different dialects and different accents, you have to be able to apply the knowledge that you've put into your brain, because for learning languages, it's not enough just to memorize everything. You have to be able to actually produce it and use it and apply your knowledge. There's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of things that need to happen. There's a lot of things you really need to be able to do and learn in order to be able to speak a language at a fluent or proficient or very high level. However, that being said, I don't think that's necessarily difficult. I think that if someone were to put a moderate amount of effort on a daily or on a weekly basis, over a number of years, you will be able to achieve a reasonably high level in that language, and it would not necessarily have been super duper mentally taxing. And so one thing that I spend my time thinking about nowadays is separating separating the word difficult or the word hard from time consuming. Because I think time consuming and hard do not necessarily have to go hand in hand. Hard can sometimes be in its own category, and time consuming can be in another category. For example, I could say it is really hard to become an A-list Hollywood actor or actress. That is something that is difficult. That's something that's hard. There's gatekeepers involved. There's a certain amount of luck involved, from my understanding anyway, right? It's really hard. There's a very low percentage of people who can get into that slot of being a Hollywood A-list or A-list actor or actress. That, my friends, is hard. And I think it's also time consuming. It would take a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of practice to be able to develop your acting abilities and make the connections, all of that. And then you'd have to get a little bit lucky, and hopefully the gatekeepers let you in, and hopefully you land that right role, from my understanding of acting anyway. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. Based on my understanding, right? That sounds hard to me. That there's a low percentage chance of success. I think for language learning, there's a much higher percent chance that someone will achieve a very high level. It just takes a lot of time and practice and effort and research and self-awareness to be like, oh wow, I'm struggling with this, so I'm struggling with this aspect of the language, this particular aspect. How am I going to improve on that? And taking the initiative to go on Google and talk to people and figure out, problem solve how they can achieve the goal of speaking a language very well or at a very proficient level based on their life scenario, right? And so that's kind of where I'm sitting right now on this topic. However, I will say this, there is another part of me, and I haven't fully fleshed this out, and it's something I've been thinking about, and I haven't fully developed an opinion, but I want to bring it up. And it's the conversation around, what if for someone processing a foreign language and going through the process of learning a foreign language, what if for whatever reason, because of their brain, their DNA, their wiring, how they are, what if it naturally feels a little bit more difficult? One example I've given many times in my YouTube videos is my mom, whose ears are not, she does not have as good of an ear for language or even for music for that matter as I do. It comes a little bit more natural to me than for her. And she does have to put in an extra amount of effort to be able to get the same results that I would when it comes to the listening part or the oral part of language learning. And so that's something I think about a lot, is for someone whose brain perhaps is not necessarily wired in that way, or perhaps they're 37 years old now, they've had no or very little experience with music, very little experience with learning languages, very little experience with hearing people with different dialects, essentially very little experience in their lives of having to use their ears and really push their listening skills to listen to different types of sounds, to listen for different types of sounds, right? So I do think that there are various skill sets that are required for learning a language that some people maybe, and I haven't decided, like I said before, but maybe there are people who don't over-index in those abilities. They don't have any natural skill set. And as a matter of fact, maybe they are below average in some of the skill sets that are required to learn a language. And so it's going to be time consuming for these people, but it also might be something that's a little bit more mentally taxing because they're using a part of their brain that they're not used to or not accustomed to actually utilizing. So this is a thing I've thought about as well, is maybe for most people, learning languages is a time-consuming process, but not necessarily super duper difficult. Maybe a little bit, but not super difficult. But maybe there is a percentage of people who find language learning actually mentally taxing because of their DNA, because of their environment, because of their lack of practice with certain types of elements or skills that you need to be able to get a high level in a language. You know, maybe they're dyslexic and the dyslexia makes it difficult to read in the language, and all of a sudden being able to read it is really hard for them, and they really do have to mentally put a lot of brain power behind being able to read. So this is something I've thought about as well, and I don't know where I land on the topic as of right now, but my initial hypothesis as of today is that, yeah, I think for some people, maybe, just maybe, learning languages might actually be a little bit difficult. I'll end the video off on this note here. It reminds me a lot of anything that requires gross motor skills. Gross motor skills, for those of you who don't know what they are, basically it's any kind of skill that requires coordination of the body. So riding a bike, swimming, dancing, doing any kind of sport, like those types of things are gross motor skills. For me, gross motor skills, for my entire life, by the way, I don't know why, my entire life, gross motor skills have never come very naturally to me. Dancing does not come natural. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. It's quite awkward for me, right? Many sports, I would be like, how do I do that? It's just never really been something that's overly natural. And for me, could I learn, for example, how to ride a dirt bike and do some dirt bike tricks, or a skateboard even? Let's take a skateboard, ride a skateboard, do some tricks on a skateboard, all of that. Absolutely, for sure, 100%, I could learn. But I do think that for me, based on my experience so far in my life, when I've tried to learn other gross motor skills, it's just more difficult for me. It does take me more mental. I feel my brain working to try and figure out, how do I make my body move to be able to accomplish the skill, right? And so, I think some people feel that way with languages, that their brain is actually working more to be able to accomplish something that maybe other people, even though they would need to work at it, they don't necessarily need to tax their brain the exact same amount. They can tax their brain a little bit less, use their brain a little bit less to accomplish the same goal, right? And the final thing, I'll really wrap up with it. I promise I will end the video after this one note, is I think attitude also makes a big difference. My attitude towards learning gross motor skills, for example, is probably not the greatest. It's probably a little bit close-minded. And that's going to affect my process of learning any gross motor skill, dancing, sports, whatever. It's going to affect the process for me, and it's going to make it more difficult because of my mindset. Because as I struggle, because I'm a little bit more closed-minded, because I'm a little bit more self-conscious, because I feel that way, I'm going to put more mental strain on myself and more pressure on myself, and that's not conducive to learning and acquiring something new. And so that is another element around difficulty, is that your own mentality is either going to make it easier or harder for you to pick up a language, to pick up really any skill. So anyway, let's wrap this video up here. I think that was very, really heady, really intellectual, really up in the clouds and philosophizing, and is that even a word? Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate your attention. You guys rock, and we will talk later. Bye guys, see ya.